He didn't grow up sight fishing the flats or even thinking about bonefish. But after a military posting brought him to Hawaii, a quarantine on base gave him enough time with a fly rod to understand bones and create a new obsession. By the end of this episode, you'll get practical tips on spotting bonefish in tough light, how to improve your casting in the wind, and how to choose flies that won't spook pressured fish. You'll also learn how to time your trip around the tides and the moon phases, and what gear holds up best on the coral flats. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Mike Bressler, Hawaii-based guide and founder of Fly Ordnance, takes us on the inside to what it's really like to chase trophy bonefish in the Pacific. We also find out what it's like and how he built a guest-friendly program from the ground up, and how anglers find success in one of the toughest flats fisheries on the planet. Along this journey today, you're going to feel how he's building a different experience, one that blends local knowledge, low-pressure approach, and a deep respect to the fish and culture. From balancing guiding with his family life to hosting guests in his home-built Bone Lodge, Michael shares what it's meant to create something special in Hawaii. All right, let's find out how he does it all. Here we go. Mike Bressler from HawaiiFlyGuide.com. How you doing, Mike?
Good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's great to always good to have a Hawaii chat. It's been a little while since I've been down there, but we've had definitely some listeners asking about it. I know it's always a hot topic because it's a place that maybe isn't known as the as far as the saltwater stuff. You don't hear as much about it, but I think it does have some good resources. And I think you are in a place that's pretty amazing. So before we jump into all that, maybe just take us back kind of this time of year. What are we at now? It's May, June. This probably will go live in July. What's happening this time of year down there?
This time of year, it's getting warmer. It's our spring, basically, and as it gets warmer, the water's getting warmer, and the fish are getting more active. I mean, bonefish here are year-round, more so in the spring and summer. Starting November, they start their spawning cycle, usually on a full moon. So it's a lot of bigger fish that are staying on the flats during the winter months, which is something that everybody wants to get that 10-pound bone, so it's a humbling place. It really is. It's not an easy fishery. It's really tough on especially beginners.
Why is it so tough on is it tougher than other places you might?
I mean, we're in the middle of the Pacific. We have a lot of trade winds, so if you're not if you're not up to par with, let's say, just double hauling and casting into the wind, it can get really frustrating for folks out there. It's a huge learning curve if in the saltwater fly fishing game. If you can get good out here, you can definitely be good anywhere.
Nice. Well, we're going to definitely talk some casting, some wind tips and stuff like that today for sure. But yeah, let's go back first, like kind of where you are now. Talk about that, which island you are. Do you fish one area, or what does that look like?
Sure. So I'm on the island of Oahu. It's probably the most visited tourist island, because of Waikiki. But where I live in the town of Hauʻula, it's considered country. Fishing wise, you can pretty much get bonefish all around this island for the most part. I mean, everybody would rather be on a flat, but I've seen them from the beach before. And it's not just bonefish. We do have trevally species here. We do have the occasional giant trevallies, bluefin trevallies, golden trevallies. They're fewer and far between, but they are definitely here. But I think the one that catches everybody's eyes is the bonefish, the o'eel.
So you're on Oahu, and there are some other islands obviously out there. You don't hear as much about the bonefish on the other ones, right? I think people think of Oahu as the big one.
Yeah, there's a few of us that are trying to get a bonefish on every island. So every island does have bonefish out here. It's just different fisheries. Not every island has flats fishing like Oahu or Molokai. Molokai is really well known for its hunting and its bone fishing as well. Bones on Maui, Lanai. The hardest places to get a bonefish out here right now is the Big Island and Kauai. Those are the challenging ones right now.
Why is that? Is just different habitat types?
It's the lack of flats, and so it's the sight fishing form is a little bit tougher. You got to get really lucky to spot one from the shoreline. by being on a flat that's, 12 inches of water or even a little bit more, where you can really spot these guys tailing or just seeing them swimming.
Okay, so you're on a while. What is the maybe let's take it back real quick to your background. Have you been on in the Hawaiian Islands for a while? How'd you land out there?
Sure, sure. So I am a Marine. I'm a retired Marine now. My last duty station was here on Oahu, but I've been flying out to Oahu now for the past probably 15 years now just to come chase these bonefish. And lucky for me, my last 3 years happened to be on Oahu. So, the height of COVID was in effect when I got sent over here, and lo and behold, yeah, lo and behold, I was
So that must have been kind of cool. Not a lot of pressure in during that time.
it it wasn't. It's funny, Dave. I was on quarantine on Ford Island, which is in Pearl Harbor, and a buddy of mine called me up. He's like, there's bonefish on that island, and the only stipulation was I couldn't leave the island. I had to stay within the lodge and the limits of the lodge there on Fort Island. And so I got to fish for 15 days on quarantine for bonefish. So yeah, I got really lucky there, and there was plenty of fish, and yeah.
So Pearl Harbor, is that right in the area? Are there some flats right out on those in that area?
There's flats on Hickam Air Force Base. There's very limited flats on Fort Island. It's more of fishing from the shoreline. If you want flats, you go over to the Triangle, which is a most common one. All the guides here have access to Triangle Flats, which is the closest one to the airport. And then we have flats throughout the island. You've got them over on Kaneohe Bay. You have them over on the west side. Yeah, so I mean, it's more convenient to have a boat to get out to some of these places for sure. Otherwise, you're getting on a stand-up paddleboard or a kayak. There's still a few places out here that you can walk in and wade.
Why, and we talk about that too. Maybe we can just start it off here with just if somebody was kind of going to be coming, maybe hooking up with you. What does that look like? If you mentioned that you can fish year round, I think probably a lot of people love to go to Hawaii during maybe during the colder months, on the lower 48. But when do you think is the most popular time? When do you recommend people come out to fish?
I mean, right now is the moment's heating up. Right now is a really, May, June, really good. If you're someone that's really looking for getting that 10-pound fish plus, I'd recommend starting coming out here in October into November and December. The challenging aspect with being out in the middle Pacific is the trade winds. I mean, you never know. So you got to be really comfortable with windy situations.
And what is the secret when you have windy situations on? How do you deal with that?
I mean, there's really no secret to it. It's the double haul. In my opinion, it's all in your double haul and the timing. If you can get a good sidearm cast underneath the wind with a good double haul, at least 40 foot, you'll be okay. If you can get more than 40 foot, great. That's awesome, but and there's times that you don't even need to cast that far. You're just gonna flip your fly over and in front of this fish and just cross its path. The key thing here is don't land the fly on their head. You want to lead them by at least a rock.
Let's think of that if we're, thinking big fish. So you mentioned the October through December is a good, and that's mainly because of spawning, or why is that again? Why is that the time to get the big fish?
Yeah, so the spawning cycle starts usually November all the way into May. These fish go out during full moons, and they go out into the deeper water. They'll go into, 400, 600 feet of water, and they'll, dive down deep, shoot up to the surface. And that's when, the magic happens with the eggs and the males doing their thing. Yeah, it's funny. It's a big reason why those offshore guys that are trolling for big marlin will use bonefish as bait.
So the spawning on bonefishes, they're going deep. Are they broadcast spawning their eggs out there? Or are they actually? Yeah. How does that? Do you know how that looks on a little bit of that?
No, there's not a lot of information on it. Just through looking at some of the studies that Bonefish and Tarpon Trust and the University of Hawaii done. just reading some of those information papers is what we know, but there's just not a ton of information. Once, we know they go deep and they go spawn, and then that's why I would suggest to anybody, and this is just my guide head talking, is you don't want to fish 3 days before or 3 days after a full moon, because there's usually not that many fish on the foot.
If it's a full moon, don't fish 3 days before or 3 days after.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like to. It's just, maybe it's just my theory, but I know guys that'll go out. It doesn't matter. They'll go out full moon or not, and some people still catch fish. I have caught fish during a full moon, but there's just not as many bonefish on the flats is what I've been seeing and noticed.
So they're essentially going out spawning. Those are the times where they're kind of migrating out, and then they might come back after the full moon's done.
Yeah, and you'll see it too on the flat. I mean, these fish, after they come back on the flat, they're hungry. They're all what we call lit up, and just they're really bright. Their pectoral fins have a really cool, like really blue teal outline, and it really glows on the flat. You can really see them, 50 yards out, you can see them coming your way.
Do you have some of these photos of some of those colors on your out there social where people can take a look?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So we got the full moon, and you mentioned if we're sticking with the big ones, we're thinking October through December. What does it look like if somebody's coming in? Let's just say they're coming in November for a trip. What's that look like for you if they were coming out? Do you typically do like day trips, half day, full day? What's that look like?
Yeah, so the unique aspect with what my wife and I have out here is, we do have a little Airbnb freestanding building. We call it the Bone Lodge. And if it's, two people, it's comfortable. If it's you and your wife, your significant other, or you and a friend, it's more than accommodating.
What about you, your wife, and a couple of kids, little kids?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some blow up mattresses for them, and the couch pulls out, and it's been done. Oh man, we've had like 5 people in here before. Not all fishing, but it's usually the husband or the wife that wants to go fish, and then the significant other goes out and does other things around the island. But yeah, I can custom to anything, but the standard is, your half days and your full days. I do have a skiff here that I just got last year. I brought it out from Florida. It's a Kayo Boatworks skiff, 18-foot flat skiff, and weather permitting, if it's not blowing 25 knots, then I'm on the back of that skiff and I'm pulling you around and showing you fish and hopefully getting you on them too.
How often throughout the year is it, there's not that much wind that you can have the skiff out there? I mean, I know you just got it, but if you look ahead.
Oh, I mean, I'm taking the skiff out no matter what. So yeah, for sure. Regardless of the wind, you can still take the skiff out and get out to some of the flats, whether it's Triangle or, anywhere around the island. It's just pulling an 18-foot boat against the wind can be a feat in itself.
So you guys have, if somebody had wanted to stay, you have that option. Are people typically coming there and getting booking a couple days with you? Or are you doing more than that? How does that look? Fish to Fly Guide Service is dedicated to sharing the incredible fly fishing opportunities around Jackson Hole. Whether floating the scenic Snake River in search of native cutthroat trout or hiking into the mountains to explore pristine tributaries, every day on the water is an adventure. You can join them for an unforgettable fly fishing experience in the heart of the Tetons at fishtofly.com. Stonefly Nets builds handcrafted landing nets that are as tough as they are beautiful. They're shaped, sanded, and finished by hand from premium hardwoods. You'll feel the difference the moment you land your first fish. Light in the hands, strong at the hoop, and made by someone who knows what it means to earn your trust. You can head over to stoneflynets.com right now and see what they've got in the shop today. That's stoneflynets.com.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Usually come out for 4 or 5 days. I've actually got a client coming out here next week on Tuesday who's just coming back from Christmas Island. Decided to stay. Yeah. So yeah, it's usually a Hawaii is that stopping point before you go out to Christmas Island. So you usually stop here for a night and then leave the next day.
So you have some people. So are those people coming in on Tuesday? Let's just talk about that. I know it's right now it's kind of mid-May as we're speaking here. So how's that going to look for them? But talk about your day. So your first day, you're going to meet them. Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, usually I'll go out and I'll pick them up from the airport, and then that gives us, it's about a 40-minute drive to the airport from where I live. So during that drive back is, we'll go through question and answers, and I show them around the island going towards home. Um, and we talk fishing, and, this client in particular, I know him really well. So I know he's just excited to get out here, and he's on the hunt for a big one. So we're definitely going to put in a lot of work, a lot of time. We'll do both. We'll do some skiff fishing or take the skiff out to some of the flats, but I've got some locations that are, a little top secret that I'll probably take him to chase for that 9+ pound bonefish.
So you can get bigger bones still in the May, even though the fall's better.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just in the fall, the thing is those I think those bigger fish are older. They're, they don't want to get all, they don't want to go through the trouble of going to the deep water. They're like home guard fish now. They're living their retired life in a sense. It's funny, those really big bonefish, they'll get one big run and then they'll just turn around and come directly at you and just, they'll just use their weight. Whereas you hook a 3 to 6 pound bonefish and they're going to get multiple runs, up to 150 yards at times.
What's the largest bonefish you've seen or heard of out there? Well, how big do they get?
Heard of is 15.7, I believe it was. It's the new Hawaii state record. Now that's not fly, that is on conventional tackle, but I've caught them at 12 pounds. I know guys that have gotten them, really close to 14 pounds, but the standard is your 10 to 11 pounds, I would say, for a really big fish.
Okay. And are there other places around the world where you can get even bigger ones, or is that pretty up there?
So I have heard there is other places, further out in the Pacific, New Caledonia. I've heard there's some really big fish there, but it's really tough to get to, supposedly. It's so I've heard up to 20 pounds have been over there, but it's, who knows if it's myth or not, but
You got to head down off of the east coast of Australia to get there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I heard that's a really good spot, and the bone fishery is starting to climb up even for Florida now. I'm hearing fish are getting bigger and more bones are coming. They had that big freeze in 2010 and I'm hearing the fishing's getting better. So, it looks like it's getting good across the world. So I just hope that, with everybody's eyes and minds on conservation and having being better stewards of our earth. I hope that the fishery gets better for everybody. It is tough here in Hawaii because bonefish is a delicacy here.
Right. We've heard about that. Yeah. So people are definitely harvesting bonefish. I think. Is there some more conversations around changing that a little bit, or how does that look? That's always a tough conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer to see, but Hawaii doesn't have any regulations for catching bonefish and keeping them for food. That's the Hawaiians have to eat, and they've grown up doing that for ages. So who am I to tell them that they can't do it? DLNR doesn't have a ton of funding, doesn't have a ton of manpower to uphold regulations. They're doing the best they can with a lot of the netting that's going across the shorelines and illegal fishing and protected zones.
Is that how they catch them? Do they typically catch them with a net, or are they using other types of gear?
They use whatever they have to their avail, whether it's hook and line, nets. You won't see too many guys spearing them. I mean, if you're in the water splashing around, that bonefish is not going to be anywhere near you. But they will net them out here. But again, it's as long as your nets are within regulations, you can do it.
Well, back to, picturing that trip. So you've got this thing next week. So somebody's going to be coming in there for 4 or 5 days. So talk about the day. Let's say the first day on the water. How is that going to look? What time are you getting rolling? How does that? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll leave the house about 6:30, 7. There's no need to to totally rush. We'll go out to the marina there, and we'll either launch from Kehi or Sand Island or Hauʻula. These are all boat launch areas. I do have access to the Marine Corps base here, as a retired Marine, and we can launch from that marina there. The key thing is it doesn't make it any better to go earlier. You want some sunlight. You want that sun to come up on the horizon so you can actually start the hunt, and we'll have waters and sandwiches on the boat, and we'll motor out. We'll more than likely, if the wind's a little too high, we'll just anchor the boat on the flat, and we'll get out there and we'll start hunting. I love fishing for these bonefish, and it is, like I said, it's a hunt. You're walking slow on the flat. You're searching for activity. You're searching for life on the flat. The more life I start seeing on the flat, whether it's turtles or stingrays or goatfish moving around, the more excited I get, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of bonefish on there. When you see life on the water, it's a pretty telling sign that there's going to be crabs on there. There's mantis shrimp on there, because you're starting to see all this other activity. So there's going to be bones up there. The summer months, spring and summer, we start getting those negative low tides, so we get to spend a good amount of time up on the flats. And typically, I'd like to get out there just before the tide shifts to come up, because that means the water's going to be moving across the flat, and that's going to bring life across the flat. It's going to bring the bonefish up there. They're going to start hunting, and we're going to start hunting them. Depending on what flat you're on is depending on whether you're going to see tailing fish or you're going to see fish just underneath the water. These bonefish are hugging the bottom of the ocean, the bottom of the flat, just feeding away. They're not always necessarily tailing all the time like that. Pictures, you picture the Bahamas and everything, you picture these tailing fish everywhere, but that's not the case. We call it, we're looking for what we call Heineken backs. So Heineken bottle green backs. So it's that green color that we're looking for in a fish that's moving across the flat.
So you mentioned the tide. So negative tides are good, and you want to get there just before it shifts. So you're basically there as the tide's starting to come in and flood those areas. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just a personal preference. That's the kind of conditions I like to fish, but you can get bonefish on a high tide, low tide, slack tide. You can still catch fish. If there's a bonefish on the flat, it usually means that it's looking for food.
Describe that again. How are you finding the fish? What's the color you're looking for?
So we call them greenbacks. So, I use a Heineken bottle as a reference, because that's the color you're basically looking for.
And is that because you don't see any other species out there that have that same color? Is that kind of why that is?
Exactly. I mean, we have some other reef fish that are very similar, but it's more of a blue color. And sometimes that'll throw, if you're new to sight fishing, that'll throw a lot of people off. But yeah, once, I would say 80% of the clientele, if they only go out with me for a day, they usually never see the fish I have them casting to.
So that you're seeing them, but they're not.
So, and so that's why it's really, it's, if you can do it, take a couple days so you can really learn how to, spot these fish, cast to these fish. Walking across the flat is key. It's how you walk. You're not walking normal. If you ever see a water bird like a heron or something walking across, the shoreline looking for prey, they're just going really slow and, tiptoeing through the water. So you really, that's where that hunting aspect comes in. You're not jogging through the woods looking for an axis deer. You're going slow, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So you're taking your time. You take pauses on the flat, sometimes up to 30 minutes to an hour. You're just going to stand still and just watch the top of the water, looking for fish. You're looking for that nervous water.
So I always think of the blacktail deer hunting. I haven't done much of that, but I've heard that that's the way you walk through the forest like that. You're just super slow, one step, And
Yeah. Yeah, any crunch on the bottom of your foot, whether you're crunching down on shell or whatever the case is basically a loud noise in the water for these fish. They can feel it on their lateral line, and you can see them. If you make the wrong step, they're either going to shoot away from you, or they're gonna kind of like it's like them tilting their head to the side, like, wait, what was that? That's not normal.
So you're sitting there slowly hunting, and then are you as the guide, are you kind of sitting there right over the shoulder, or are you kind of walking with them?
Yeah, depending if you're left-handed or right-handed. If you're a right-handed caster, I'm gonna more than likely, and then wind dependent too. So it's key that you can forward cast, sidearm cast, do a backhand cast. It's because depending on the wind, I can place myself in multiple places for you. But so if we're walking around, we see a fish, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna whisper over, hey, take a pause right here. I see something, and we're gonna watch this fish because I'm probably gonna see him probably, anywhere from 10 to 50 feet out away. At times you can almost look 50 yards away and see these fish coming in. And we're gonna, and then I'll point the fish out. If the client sees him, great. If not, I'll just have them get ready to cast, and we'll just you'll kind of just watch the fish and see which way it's swimming, which way it's feeding, and then you'll determine where you're going to place the cast. Bonefish aren't necessarily like erratic swimmers. They're more of like, imagine a goat that's grazing out on the grass. They're not going from left to right really quick. They're just kind of grazing and keep going forward to the next blade of grass. And it's kind of the same thing these bonefish do. They'll get on a trajectory, and you can kind of study them for a little bit and be like, okay, I think they're going to go from left to right. Go ahead and start casting out to, your 2 o'clock, about 40 feet, lay that cast down, and you're just waiting to see if this fish gets closer to fly. Usually the fish gets to within 2 to 3 feet, and you're doing a really slow and smooth long strip. And at that point, that fish usually sees it, comes over to the fly, and they just do basically a headstand on the fly. And don't trout set, whatever you do. Whatever you do, just don't trout set. If anything, put the tip of the pole in the water and just keep stripping. That fish will hook itself, and before you know it, is running off with all your fly line and into your backing. Yeah, it never gets old.
God. And so why, just a reminder on the not trout, why is the trout set so bad? What is it doing versus the strip set?
So the trout set, as soon as you pick up, that fly is basically doing if you imagine the fly's mouth, the mouth of the fish going down on the fly, as soon as you trout set, it provides basically a big U bend in the fly line and into your tippet, which basically just rips that fly out of its mouth and then out of the water. So it's going out of the mouth, down into the water, and then straight back up. Whereas when you're doing a strip set or just stripping, it's a direct connection to that fly without moving it away from the zone. It's keeping it into the fish's mouth.
Yeah, in the fish's mouth, because it's eating, and then you're just stripping it right into the mouth.
Yeah. A lot of times, it's just, if you just keep stripping, that fish will feel that hook, and they get so spooked that they hook themselves by turning and just taking off. So a lot of times it's just, you don't even, in the blink of an eye, you're already hooked up, and all your fly line is leaving you.
Exactly. And the strip set too is you're in the water still, so even if it didn't hit it, it's still in the water being, so it could take it again, right? Or do you ever have other fish? Does that ever happen where you're stripping, that fish doesn't take it, and another fish takes it later?
Oh yeah. So papillo, which is a basically a juvenile bluefin trevally, or a trevally species. They're called papillo in Hawaiian. You'll sometimes go
How do you spell that?
Papio.
So how does that look? What happens there? So describe that situation.
Yeah, we call them, they're thieves. There's times the bonefish will see your fly, and they'll be quicker to the fly than the bonefish, and just steal it from you. And they're a fun fight, but they don't. If you get one that's 5 pounds, that's a big one. You know what I mean? So But yeah, it's still a good time. You know, it cats.
Yeah, I still feel like that's cool. I feel like me and a lot of the people we talk about, listeners on the podcast, I think species is cool, right? Numbers and just getting different species, even if they're, like this. Sounds like I'd love to see this fish. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a blast either way. You know what everybody strives for on the island is getting the golden trevally. That to us is our unicorn. Yeah, that's the big one for us.
Why is the golden trout? Is it because it's just a unicorn? Why is that one so special?
It's a unicorn because there's not many caught. You know, for instance, I had 1 year I caught 8, and then 2 years where I didn't catch any, and I've seen them on the flat. You know, so they're few and far between, but they are definitely a treat to catch. And it's just that one trevally species that has like a really gummy carp like mouth, and they're the ones that feed on the flats. Unlike where you see a GT on the flats, a giant trevally, they're more than likely chasing the bonefish. You know, they're chasing goatfish. They're more predatory to other fish, whereas the goldens are eating crabs, mantis shrimp, and baby octopus and such.
And they get big, right? These fish can get pretty decent size.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you can get them up to 15 pounds. They get bigger than that as well, but yeah, they're a treat.
So there's another species. So we talked a few here, but let's take it back on the flat. So you mentioned the slow, smooth strip. So is that describe that just a kind of you're just pulling slowly, just like long, like two foot strips?
Yeah, so you get your initial cast out, however far you're getting out, and then usually I always suggest that you take a couple, like maybe 2 strips at the most, just to get all the slack out of your fly line and all the slack out of your leader system out. So you have that direct connection to your fly when you get ready to start stripping, and that when that fish sees the fly. Um, and so basically, in a sense, if you're starting your strip, I mean, it's you're not. How do I describe the speed? It's really just slow and easy. What you're trying to do is just bump that fly and keep that fly on the floor of the ocean there. And you're just barely slowly ticking it in long strips. And what I mean by long strips, if you're starting your strip, you're ending your strip behind your back or behind your leg. So you're basically stripping about 2 feet, it within, 10 seconds, real slow.
And you're imitating. And what are you imitating typically when you're doing that?
Yeah, you're imitating that crab or that mantis shrimp, just bumping along, searching for other holes to live in, for other mantis shrimp to fight and other things to eat. And that's what you're doing. And you're just trying to make that fly act as nature has made crabs and mantis shrimp to act.
Which is just kind of a walking.
Yeah, it's funny, you see them on the flats, and as soon as they see you or they hear you crunching on the flats, they scurry really fast away from you. But they're definitely out there. But when they're not, they're not afraid or they don't even know you're around, you can sit there and watch them, and they're just slowly creeping around, just searching through different cracks and crevices on the ocean floor, um, just looking for their food and doing their thing, you know? You just want that, and that's why, like, a lot of times if you're on a bone, you've got to cast out, and you know, say you do a quick strip and it makes that fly jump up into the water column a little bit before it flutters down. A lot of times that'll spook a bonefish away because their prey never jumps up at them or jumps out of into the water column, higher water column before going back down. That just freaks them out. They want to be snipers on their food.
That's the amazing thing. Yeah, they're snipers. They're fast. They're out there, and so you make that cast, the first cast, and you just basically let it sink. Is that kind of what you do once if you see,
Yeah,
let's say, yeah,
you're gonna let that fly flutter down all the way to the bottom. You're gonna get the slack out of your fly line and your leader system. And then, we'll just keep watching that fish. But, at times you may have to take a recast, depending on, say, the fish is coming it's coming in the direction of the fly, and then it decides to meander off just a little bit to the left. So this is why it's a good reason why we lead these fish by at least the rod length, is in case you need to pick up and cast again to get better placement. you can do that without spooking the fish.
So you might have to pick it up, and then how do you pull it out? How do you not spook them? Do you just kind of slowly strip your line in, or how do you pick it up without?
Yeah, depending how much line you have out, you're definitely not ripping the fly line off the water, because that'll spook them too. So you want to make sure you're able to cast where you're picking up that fly line, and then once you see your leader system, then you can start your back cast to get ready to place it somewhere else. It's all dependent. If you got 60 feet of fly line out, you're probably not going to rip that all the way out. You're going to overpower your fly rod.
And what is just to finish that up on? Well, leaders was one other thing, and then flies. I think you might have some fly patterns to talk about a little bit here, but maybe talk about the leader first. What does that look like?
So here's, and everybody's different. A lot of guys out here, they like to use the 16-pound tippet, but typically my standard build of a leader is I'll do a 6-foot piece of 40-pound nail knot to the fly line, and then I'll take another 3-foot piece of 30-pound, and I'll do a slim beauty knot connection between the 40 and 30. And then I'll take another 2 to 3 feet of 20-pound with your standard blood knot. And then the connection to the fly, any loop knot is going to work, but I definitely usually stick with the standard Rapala loop knot on there.
So it's okay. And then, so you stick with 20-pound tippet.
Yeah, I do. I like to catch the fish. There's a lot of rock and coral out here for them to get wrapped up around, and I don't think it has any effect on them. You can, if it's a really calm day, there's no wind, I will probably drop down to 16, a good 3 to 4 foot piece of 16-pound tippet. And standard lengths, 12 to 14 feet leaders is what we use out here.
12 to 14. Okay. And what's the perfect bonefish rod for out there?
Yeah, I've got plenty of rods to provide if needed, but I use an 8 weight, 9-foot 8 weight, reel. You want to make sure you have a sealed drag system reel, definitely, because we're in salt water, so you want the advantage as much as possible. At least 150 yards of backing.
Yeah, 150. Okay.
Yeah, at least. And if you have if you have issues casting in the wind, I'd say keep that 8 weight and just put some 9 weight line on there. And my go-to line out here, and I haven't changed it now in 5 years, is the Cortland Redfish Tropical. I haven't had that fly line break on me, anything like, and I'm not endorsed or sponsored or anything like that by Cortland. I love that line out here for these fish. It withstands the coral. I haven't had any breaks. I haven't lost the fly line yet, due to the coral out here.
And you've probably scraped some coral in your time.
Oh, absolutely. How's that saying? If you're not bumping in a race, you're not racing.
Right. You got to get down there a little bit. It's awesome. And then, and we talk leaders, and then what about flies? Do you have some flies that you are kind of unique for out there, or talk about that, what you're using? On DeMark Lodge offers a world-class experience with one of the finest rainbow trout and brown trout fisheries in the world. Their family-owned and operated Missouri River Lodge offers comfortable accommodations, delicious home-cooked meals, and personalized service that make you feel like family. Days on the water are capped off by appetizers, beverages, dinner, and stories on the back deck and around the campfire. Book your stay for an unforgettable fly fishing adventure where memories are made and the fish stories are real. You can head over right now to wetflyswing.com/ondemark. That's ONDEMARK on DeMark right now to book your magical Missouri River trip. Step into the world where the river whispers and the fishing is nothing short of legendary. This year, I ventured into the heart of eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton territory where the fish were larger than life and the waters held the secrets of the best fly fishing out west. Yellowstone Teton territory is not just a location, it's a gateway to adventures that will etch themselves into your memory. With crystal clear rivers like the Henry's Fork and the South Fork of the Snake, and enough lakes to keep you going all year long, make your way to Yellowstone Teton territory and embark on a journey to one of North America's finest fly fishing destinations. Whether you're planning your trip now or just dreaming it up, the YTT is where those dreams turn into reality. Remember, Yellowstone Teton territory. That's Teton, Teton. It's time to experience Eastern Idaho for yourself and support this podcast at the same time.
He's got a fly that's called the spam and eggs, and that fly is online. You can see it. You can learn how to tie it. I have a fly that's very similar, maybe a little bit. It's a little bit smaller than his pattern, and there is some tweaks, just like every fly tyer does. They all make a little tweak here and there of a normal pattern. I'll do that pattern, but I'll take a feather and palmer that feather across the whole base of it, and I tie my silly legs on a little bit differently than that pattern, and it works great. You don't need much out here. I really don't use any flash on any of my flies. I don't know what it is, but the more natural looking without any shine on it, the better. Crazy Charlie's, a heavier weighted Crazy Charlie still works out here just fine. Any shrimpy pattern that is made with a bunny strip works fine. Arctic fox works great. Raccoon works great. EP just as good. You could take a hook and put a good EP tail on there and put some brown stripes on there and dub the body up and put a couple of silly legs on there. It's gonna work. But I think key is no flash.
Right, no flash. And why do you think that is? Because they're kind of spookier out there? Because the flash is the idea of being a little subtle, like it looks like a fish flashing, right? Or whatever the creature is.
Yeah, I don't think it's having a bunch of flash is not what the bonefish is looking for. They see that and they're like, well, what, a crab's not out there with pom-poms made out of chenille and flashing them, you know what I mean? And neither are mantis shrimp. If there's days that I go out on the flat or I take the wife and the dogs out to the flat just to hang out on the sandbar. I'll walk out there and just look at these mantis shrimp and I'll look at the crabs and I don't see any shine. If anything, you see, a translucent look to their body. So, the key thing that tells me is less is more on material.
Yeah, the spam and eggs is definitely a cool looking fly. Does it vary in color, or is gold and that a typical color, gold, yellowish?
Yeah, your typical colors out here are going to be your browns, your tans, and at times even black. We're matching the hatch per se. And when you look at these mantis shrimp that are out here, brown, tan, and black. I mean, there's sometime here now in the spring and summer, you'll start seeing some mantis shrimp that have an orange hue to them, a translucent orange. And at times that color will work as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at some photos of mantis shrimp and they're like super amazing. Like blues, reds.
Yeah, they're wild. They're adapted to their surroundings for sure.
All the colors in the spectrum. I'm looking at one and it's got like every color of the rainbow and more.
Yeah, so I mean, and there's different species across the world, Dave. But when you come to Hawaii, you just take a look around and you, like, I'm pretty sure I know which picture you're looking at that's got all the green and purple and pinks on it. Yeah, they're I mean, I'm sure we have them here, but you don't see that color up on the flat. We're looking at these, 1 to 2 inch mantis shrimp that are, really small and juvenile that they're still in their growing phase. Whereas, they have mantis shrimp that are white and black, white with black stripes coming all the way around them, so there's so many different colors you can do.
Yeah, it's a spawning thing probably or something with the sexual, dimorphism or something with the other coloration.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Color attracts, right? In that sense.
So that's a little on the fly. So that's awesome. Let's kind of go out high level real quick we've been talking, really focusing Oahu. You talk about that. If somebody's going into one of the other islands, whether that's Kauai or Maui, what would you recommend as far as understanding if maybe somebody's doing a DIY? What's your best tip there to figure, get a chance at a fish?
For starters, I'll say this, for Molokai, you don't really want to do DIY there. It's one of the few islands that is holding true to being a true Hawaiian native island. Doesn't have a lot of touristry. Yes, they have fly fishing there, and you know, I think there's 2 guides left there. But if you get caught walking the flat and there's a house right there, the locals there, their thought is they own the water behind their home and they own the land up in front of their home. So it's not that they're aggressive, but they'll get out there and be like, "Hey, you're gonna have to leave," type thing. Maui, they have very limited flats, but there's definitely bonefish there. And sure, I mean, DIY, you know, if you get on satellite imagery and you look, you know, you look for those beaches that have a little bit of a flat on them or a little, you know, and then there's a barrier reef just outside. Those are usually good holding points for these fish. Um, you know, on the island of Oahu, I mean, really, it's prime there because just about everywhere on the island there's going to be flats. I think for anybody that's doing DIY, if you're going to do walk and wade, I think the focus should be on tide. You know, if you're not going to try to go out on a high tide, there's usually most flats you won't be able to get out to them either, if it's too high. So you want to focus on those low tides where you have a gradual high tide coming in, so you get more time on the flat.
So you want to go out to optimize, so maybe get there during from a high tide going down to a low or something like that, or somewhere in there. Yeah.
You know, you know, depending on the tide swing, you know, if it's only going to 1 foot, then more than likely you get to spend the whole day out on the flat. You know, if the tide's swinging to 2.8 feet, then you know you're going to be limited as how far out you can go.
Gotcha.
You know, but you won't be swimming though. So that's the good part.
Right. So, but there are places you can, if you didn't have a boat, you can go right off, find some flats
Oh, absolutely.
around Oahu that you can just walk to. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, none of that's, you know, everywhere in Hawaii, if you're on the beach or in the water, you're allowed to be there. It's not like you're in somebody's backyard and nobody owns the water per se.
Oh, okay. So nobody owns, and even on Molokai, it's just that things are a little bit different there.
Yeah, just things are different there on that island.
Yeah, that's always a good, no matter where you are in the world, and no matter what the laws are, I think the landowner is always right. You know what I mean? Even if they're wrong, it's always a good.
Yeah, you want to respect the locals. You want to, you know, you want to respect their way of living and you know, the locals, you know, there's not much going on Molokai anyways. You know, I don't think they even have a road light there or stoplight there yet.
Right. It's remote.
So those guys are really dependent on living off the land and living off the ocean.
And then what about on the Big Island? What is that? How is there any opportunity there?
There is, there absolutely is. That one's a hard one. I haven't figured that one out. I'll be honest with you. That's the one area that I haven't been able to get a bonefish yet. There in Kauai.
And Kauai, and that's the opposites, right? Because isn't the Big Island is the newest, right? The most, and then Kauai is the oldest island. Is that how it works?
That's a great question. I don't know that answer.
I think that's right. The more active volcano, it means it's a little bit newer, and Kauai, I think, is the
Well, the more active volcanoes on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Yeah, the Big Island. Yeah, so I think that's the newer island. It's still being created, and then it goes down the chain to the oldest, which is Kauai. We'll have to fact check that to make sure I'm correct, but
Yeah. I'm going to look it up because it's something I should probably know.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. But you spend most of your time, it sounds like, fishing Oahu. I mean, that's where you live, so that's obviously the place you're at most of the time. If somebody's going to get a trip from you, that's where it's going to be?
Correct.
Okay. And I am looking now. Yes, Kauai is the oldest of the main Hawaiian islands. It was formed approximately 5.1 million years ago.
Wow. Amazing, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. So, okay. So it sounds like with the DIY, which, a lot of people will be DIYing it. I think if, like a lot of these things, if they want to decrease the learning curve, connecting with you for at least a day would be a good idea. But there are some opportunities to do it there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you're going to get a lot of information if you hire a guide, say for a half day, whereas you just go up to a guide while he's loading his boat and just asking him, "Hey, where should I go?" A lot of times they're going to be like, "Well, why don't you just get me for a half day, and then I can not only just teach you about our place and where we live and our water and this bone fishery, but he's more susceptible to tell you, "Hey, on this tide tomorrow, I would go here." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and we've got like, we got a few guides here that are really great, that are very experienced, not just me. It's we got guys here that are, that not only guide here, they guide here, Alaska, here in Puerto Rico. My guiding here is more, it's something, it's a passion of mine. It's something that I love to do. I'm not trying to do it to put food on the table every day. As a retired Marine, I have that cushion where, I've got my pension, where a lot of these guides, they don't. They're dependent on their guide business.
Right. Well, I mean, pretty amazing. I was going to ask you a little bit about that because I think it is kind of a cool, unique, the history there of Oahu, right, with everything. But before we get there, I want to talk. Let's start to take it out here with our conservation kind of corner segment. We always like to kind of start to wrap things up, and today we're going to give a shout out to Patagonia. Patagonia's new Swift Current waders. We're helping get the word out on them. And I'm learning more about them as they go. The great thing about Patagonia, it's an amazing company because all the conservation stuff they do, right? I mean, we had Yvon Chouinard on the podcast, and he told me, talking to him, he's like, man, his mind is always on that. How do they make the world better? Right, saving our home planet. So we want to give a big shout out to Patagonia because we think they're one of the best companies out there first. But for you, maybe what is that? We talked a little bit on the conservation. Are there groups you'd recommend we should be following out there, helping to protect, support bonefish, not only in Hawaii but around the world?
Yeah, right now, I mean, I think it's key to understand that Hawaii just started this year is purchasing a fishing license for non-residents. So for all those DIY guys and those guys that are coming into Hawaii, and that's any island, there is a requirement to buy a fishing license, whereas years past, you didn't have to have that. Um, so I think that's a really good step in the right direction. It provides funding for, DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources. It provides that funding for coral restoration. If you got a healthy coral, if you got a healthy reef, you're going to have healthy fish. So I think there are steps that Hawaii is taking. It's just still pretty fresh because in April is when that fishing license requirement came into effect. But they've started doing basically like Zoom calls and Zoom meetings where they're talking more of the biologists and what the biologists are seeing on the reef, how they're trying to clean it up or how they're trying to let it grow. So again, I mean, that's a start. Us as fly fishermen or fishermen in general, I think it's key that, we treat these fish correctly. You don't pick them up by their gill plate. You don't pick them up by the bottom lip. Wet your hands before you pick up a fish if you want to take a picture, and take the picture quick and get them in the water and get them on their way. There's a lot of guys that are fishing barbless for bones out here. And that it helps to get that fish off the hook quicker and can be done. As long as you keep a tight connection with that hook on that fish, you're not going to lose them. So I think just in general, just, take self-awareness and fish handling and where you're walking on the flat. If you're on the flat, you're not walking on top of big coral heads that are alive. You're kind of walk around it, and stay off the coral, and that'll help as well. But there isn't, per se an organization that I've seen out here that's doing really much in the terms of conservation out here specifically for bonefish. Like I said, there's been limited studies on them. Hopefully we can get Bonefish and Tarpon Trust to expand and come out here and do some more research and help us out.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, well, hopefully somebody's listening now from that organization. We'll give a shout out to them right here. And it seems like, Hawaii is one of those places that, who doesn't want to travel to Hawaii, right? I mean, it seems like everybody, I have never heard anybody that didn't love Hawaii, so I feel like it seems like a place they should be. Good. So we'll work on that a little bit as far as the conservation end. But let's hear. I'm interested a little bit. We're doing an event this year with Project Healing Waters, and it's the first time we've had them on the podcast. But we're actually going do an event down on the White River, and it's going to be. We're really excited about it because we're going to be on the water with some veterans. I never served, but I'm learning about it. But I mean, you're in a place, Pearl Harbor, right? I mean, in that area. What does that feel like being? I mean, I don't know your history as a Marine, but just do you think about that? Is that something like daily? You're like, wow, because I think of the history there, how much that just right, well before our time. But yeah, what's your take on that living there?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, there's definitely a ton of history all over the island. There's reminders of the past, and 1941 or 42 it was that Japan came across. A lot of people don't know this, but it was Marine Corps Base Hawaii that got bombed first before they flew over the mountains and started bombing in Pearl Harbor on the ships and the people there. It definitely resonates with me, so not just as a veteran myself, so there is one thing, if there's a veteran listening, reach out to me because I try to take a veteran out every month for free to go fly fishing. So that's just my take on it, and so and the reason why I do that is, 24 years in the Marine Corps, numerous combat deployments, you know, I know what Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, even Coast Guard have gone through with, the mental stress of either combat or a rough time. And, you know, there's this movie out there called Mending the Line, which kind of depicts that, right? And it's really true and for our veterans out there. So it's not just about going out and hunting for these bonefish. It's mind clarity. It's not thinking about anything else but what you're doing on the water that day, and I think it helps greatly. And it does you don't need to be a veteran to do that, if you're going through a rough time, mentally, physically, get out on the water because 'cause it'll rejuvenate you.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about one of them about fly. Once you do it, but really it's anything outdoors. Being on the water, being just out in the fresh air. I think it's kind of crazy how the world's changed, right, with the iPhones and all the electronic stuff, and the kids who are in their devices just like adults are. It seems crazy, to think like just as we're getting ready to go on a trip next week, we're thinking like, man,
Right, you're working, right?
I've been behind the computer a lot. I'm behind it right now, right? We're talking because we love sharing information. Yeah, but we're really excited about getting on the water, like, taking that break for a week, or whatever, a few days or a day just to get away from it and just be, yeah. So no, I appreciate that. And, I think that, like I said, this event we're doing on the White River is going to be really cool because I'm going to probably hear some stories, from people and, maybe just connect with some people that had a different, history than I have had. But, so I guess that was one thing I wanted to definitely touch on that. As we take it out here, I have a couple of random ones for you, but let's just kick this off with a few tips. So we're going back. That person is going to be listening now. They're going to Hawaii. Maybe they're going to be on Oahu. You want to give them 2 or 3 tips. Let's just say they're DIYing it on their own. What are you telling them if they're either getting ready or on the water to maybe have more success for a bonefish?
Yeah, so I think my first tip is, you're spending money to come to Hawaii. It's not a cheap trip, right? So take the time, go out to the park, and hopefully it's windy for you, and just start casting into the wind and double hauling, and being able to double haul and make sure that fly line cuts through the wind with a sidearm cast. Get that practice in. Take the time out so when you get out here on the water, you can fully enjoy what you're about to do.
Yeah. And what is the sidearm? What does that do when you have the sidearm low? What is the load?
So in sense, instead of going, straight up your 10 and 2 normal cast, you're basically going to the side. And what that does, it cuts underneath the wind, right? So if you're doing a normal fly cast, you're going to have more base of that full wind catching that fly line as that loop is trying to turn over. Whereas by going sideways, you're kind of going, you're still going against the wind, but you're kind of going underneath and you're not hitting a big wall of wind, you're hitting that undercut of wind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. So you're getting out of the wind a little bit. Okay. And then to practice, if somebody was going to be practicing at the park, how let's say their trip is in a month, how often should they be going to the park for, like 10 minutes at a time, 5 minutes, an hour?
Yeah, I think if you go out for, 15 minutes to half an hour, that's good. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to create bad habits or anything like that. If you feel a really good cast, put that fly rod down for a little bit, for a minute, and then just think about how you did that cast, what you did right, and then pick it up and try to do the same cast again. Um, you know, I, Everybody develops bad habits, even I do at times. You're on the water for 8 hours and you're on your last hour and you're tired. you know, you're probably dehydrated because you haven't been drinking enough water. So it's getting really comfortable with your cast and casting into the wind is crucial out here. Um, I think two is just learning how to walk on the flat. You're don't just take your time. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Learn to take your time. Um, and three would be, your head, your eyes are on a swivel. Look as far out as you can into the water with a good pair of polarized glasses is crucial as well. But just study the water. Look for the differences in the water. If the wind is pushing against you and you see the wind ripples coming against you, and then all of a sudden you look, 20 yards off and you see a wake going against the wind, well, that's not the wind. That's probably a fish that's moving around there. Um, take a look at the surroundings, take a look at what you're stepping on, and just be aware of your environment, I think is crucial as well. It is a hunt when you get out here. Um, and it's not a rush to get on a fish. It's a rush to find them by going slow.
Those are killer. I think that's perfect to set somebody up for success here. And the practicing is always good. And you mentioned the double haul as well. And I think you could always, if you wanted to, before you got on, get a casting instructor. I've heard Chris Korch has been on. He's a casting instructor, and he's talked about guys going to the salt flats and maybe their first time, and then checking in with him and be like, hey, I need some help. And what he finds is that a lot of times it's the rod. Sometimes they don't have the right setup or the right action of rod. And
Yeah, every human is different, right? So everybody's cast is going to be different. There's people that look down at overlining a rod. There's people that say, hey, you don't need the 9 weight line for an 8 weight rod. I don't think that's the case. It depends on how you cast. If you're a big dude like Arnold, Schwarzenegger, and he probably doesn't need all that power to accelerate to a stop. He's going to use more of his forearm and his wrist than anything else. Um, so yeah, that's if you can get to a fly shop, I would definitely suggest if there's an instructor that has a couple different setups that you can try out, different brands. Um, and I think it's crucial that, if you've got a park that's got a pond or a fly casting pond nearby, I'd highly suggest go cast there, because casting on land without the drag of the water on your fly line it's going to be two different things. So it helps to understand that when you're casting on the water, when you go to pick up that cast and go again, you're already starting to load that rod by picking it up and dragging that fly line through the water. So it's automatically starting to load. So maybe you don't have to power it back on your back cast as much.
Yep, exactly. No, those are all awesome tips, and I think we'll leave it there for today. We will send everybody out to HawaiiFlyGuide.com and at Fly Ordnance on Instagram. It sounds like so. Yeah. Any other words of advice before we head out of here? Do you feel like somebody listening now might have a chance at a bonefish on their next trip? Do you guys have one? Is there a Project Healing Waters in Hawaii?
Yeah, hey, definitely. I mean, you brought up Project Healing Waters. Hey, shout out to those guys. I love what they do. And again, I'm that's why I say, hey, give them my name if you want. Again, I'd love to start it up here. If you're new to fly fishing, come out, come enjoy it. You're not just going out to catch a bonefish, go out to enjoy the day, go out and to enjoy the sights of what you're looking at and where you're at in Hawaii. It's beautiful out here.
Yeah, the fish is just a bonus. If you get a bonefish, that's the bonus, right, on top of the trip.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Well, appreciate your time today, and we'll definitely be in touch and look forward to hopefully seeing you out there on the water someday soon.
Thanks, Dave.
If Hawaii's on your radar, if you're heading there for travel, if you're heading there for fun, Bonefish, they are calling. Mike's built a setup that keeps things simple, local, and super dialed in. He's got a great flats fishery, but like you heard, all around the island, and not just this island, all around Hawaii. If you want to check him out, go to hawaiiflyguide.com right now and check out the Bone Lodge. And if you get a chance, shoot me an email if you're interested in a trip here, dave@wetflyswing.com, and we'll look forward to following up on all the details there, maybe putting something together. If you get a chance, please follow this show if you haven't done already. If you haven't sent me an email yet, send me an email to the email I just mentioned, dave@wetflyswing.com. I'd love to hear if this episode was helpful. And I hope to see you very soon on the water. We actually just launched the Lodge at Palisades Creek giveaway event. It's going right now, wetflyswing.com/giveaway for your chance to win a all expenses paid, all-inclusive trip to the Lodge at Palisades Creek on the South Fork of the Snake River. It's going right now. Sign up now for your chance. And I appreciate you for stopping in today and sticking around to the very end. Hope you have a great afternoon. Hope you have a spectacular evening. And if it's morning, hope you're enjoying those eggs and a little bit of toast. Hopefully enjoying those with you on the river sometime. We'll talk to you soon. All right.